Cinema is a powerful medium capable of making us think deeply about the world we live in and our place within it. But perhaps no genre is as powerful as documentary, prompting us to challenge our preconceived notions about nearly every aspect of our existence. Documentaries encourage us to interrogate our relationship to nature, other cultures, our homeland, and to ourselves and our fellow men. Documentary, like nearly every other genre, is difficult to rigidly define. When we use the term documentary, we often mean a film which depicts things which are real, as opposed to fictional. The stories told by documentary do not begin with a screenplay, but instead usually begin with an observation of the real world. Documentaries are about real things in the real world. While this can serve as the beginning of our definition, it's not the whole story. Documentary films are a representation of the real world, but they are not a perfect reproduction of it. They are about things that happened or things that are happening. Like fictional films, they often follow an Aristotelian curve. Documentaries are stories driven with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just as narrative films span several genres, the same expansiveness exists within documentary. City of Ghosts, produced in 2017, documents the efforts of the Syrian rebel group Raqqa as they try to show the world what is happening in their homeland. Many are dying as a result of their efforts to inform the world and to create a record of these atrocities. The current golden age of documentaries began in the 1980s. These films challenge assumptions and alter perceptions. Often structured as stories, they are stories with a difference. The stories stem from the world we all share. The characters or people we see in documentaries are usually real people, not actors. On occasion, an actor may stand in, but only as a representation of a real person. Often during a discussion or interview, the subject will engage in direct address. Direct address occurs when a person speaks directly to the camera, something you would rarely see in a narrative film unless it was being used to comedic effect. Documentaries adopt no fixed inventory of techniques, address no one set of issues, display no single set of forms or styles. They do, however, tend to adhere to certain conventions. Often documentaries contain a narrator telling us the story throughout the film. There are often interviews, the use of real or historically accurate locations, as well as moments which cut away to important documents or images relevant to the story. The cutaways are part of what Nichols refers to as evidentiary editing, meaning the camera will cut away from the interview or action footage to show us documents or images which support the story being told, often to prove an historical fact. Directed by Frederick Wiseman, Ex Libris does not contain narration. Instead, it relies upon clever juxtapositions to tell its story about the library, the public, and the impact of public spaces on social cohesion. Documentaries are defined in part by their mode or style or form of presentation, not only or not necessarily by their representation of an absolute fact or truth. There are 6 commonly acknowledged documentary modes. Poetic mode, closely resembling experimental films, emphasizes visual associations in a more formalistic style. Expository mode relies heavily on voiceover and presents its story in a problem-solution format. Observational mode works to make the camera unobtrusive in an effort to record people in their natural surroundings. Observation only. These filmmakers rarely directly engage their subjects. Participatory mode places great emphasis on the relationship between the filmmaker and her subject, and is often presented as a conversation. Reflexive mode calls attention to the constructed nature of documentary cinema and keeps the viewer aware that they are engaging in a mediated space. Performative mode is a more expressive or subjective mode of documentary. It strives to engage and awe its audience. Beyond the modes, there are styles. There are slice-of-life documentaries, which seek to show the viewer wonders inherent in everyday life. There are ethnographies and travelogues, which seek to explore and share different cultures and locales. There are propaganda films, which sought, and still do, to control the public's attitudes and perceptions about a given socio-political reality. Direct cinema, both a style and movement, wherein the camera is there as a dispassionate observer, wanting only to capture events as they unfold. And finally, subjective documentary, which is clear and overt about its political message. The short film, On Fathers and Sons in Love, makes clear assertions about the rigidity of current definitions of American masculinity and how that rigidity should be seen as a problem.
The reason that love is important is that we're hardwired for it. The reason we survived in the African plains, not being able to run fast or have long teeth, was we banded together.
I find no need to define masculinity. I think it's too simple, it's too coarse to deal with masculine and feminine. It's so constructed, it's so contrived. If I am who I am, I'm an adult male, I am a man, I have children, and I'm attempting to take care of my children, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. The way I do it, if healthy, if loving, if considered, can't be wrong because it doesn't conform to a notion of masculinity.
Throughout the film, the subjects and interviewees clearly support a more expressive and loving view of what a man should be, and suggest society would be happier and healthier by shifting its notion of heteromasculinity. The film's stance places it clearly within the category of subjective documentary. The short film Under an Arctic Sky, produced by Chris Burkhart, is a good example of performative mode. The filmmaker created a documentary celebrating his passion for not just surfing, but his passion for conservation and respecting the power of nature. Sports films like this one reach and teach an audience that may not normally explore films on conservation or existentialism. Documentary films are as varied as the filmmakers who undertake this particular cinematic labor. Documentaries teach us things about people and places we may never encounter. They awe us and inspire us to think in new ways, and they also entertain. While they represent real things in the world, they do not reproduce them. Documentary film, just like any other film, is mediated. These films go through stages of production where many people make decisions about what it is we see as the viewer, which means they are more subjective than objective. However, that knowledge should never diminish their value. Documentary film has been and continues to be one of the best and most beautiful ways to teach a large audience new things.